Susan Crabtree reporting on the vote counting that was going on in California right into Thanksgiving. And why is that happening when Florida, a state approximating the population of California, can get all its votes, all its ballots counted in about 3 or 4 hours? Well, one of the things is the California legislature continues to extend the time for voting, continues to add layers of regulations that provide for people to come in and cure their ballot if there's a missing or questionable signature. This year, the California legislature, writes Crabtree, extend the time voters must respond to the notice and return the signed form to December 1st. And, Republicans are in the super minority in that position. It's an issue in California, states like California and New York, even if they're dominated by the Dems, because unlike Illinois, they have competitive congressional races. Oh, and by the way, the Republicans in the House are looking at the smallest majority in almost a century. So these races, like that Steele race that went against Steele after weeks of counting, are critically important, not just to those individual seats, but to the larger balance of power in D.C. For more on this and other topics, pleased to be joined by Susan Crabtree. She's the RealClearPolitics.com's national political correspondent. Susan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yes, it's great to be with you, Dan.
It seems to me like the one silver lining in this silliness in places like, Arizona, California, Minnesota, we'll get to in a second, is at least it keeps the attention on the problems that we have at the state level that may provide more impetus for Republicans to establish at least some baseline federal standards when it comes to the administration of elections for federal offices.
Yes, absolutely. I know that the Constitution provides that the states and the state legislatures will handle a lot of this. But guess what? During COVID, all that got reversed, right? We had federal mandates coming down and a lot of pressure from the federal level to push for all mail-in voting and for these lax rules that California now has gone to the extreme on. They are the training for their state legislature, that the people that were elected start today, and some of these races haven't even been decided because the federal law provides that December 13th is when they will have to be certified by the Secretary of State, the state law. So it's sort of ridiculous if you don't even know if you are going through the training, if you are elected or not. And they keep extending it in California every year, making it more and more lax. And they wonder why their counties aren't jumping through hoops to get these votes counted. We have till December 1st. We don't need to do this. They have till December 5th, the counties, to get all the votes counted. So they're not allocating the resources up front. They're not paying people overtime. And they're just doing it little by little to make their deadlines. And some of the state the elected officials at the state level are saying, well, that's not what we intended. Well, what do you think is going to happen at the county level? They're not going to pay people overtime if they don't have to. So it's sort of a ridiculous system. And here we are, going through Thanksgiving. I was talking to the California Republican chair, Jessica Milan Patterson, and she's like, we're still working. All of our lawyers are watching the vote counting. They're all curing the ballots. Curing the ballots is when they find something that's amiss, a signature that doesn't match, and it's very lax rules in California. So then the parties go and find the people. So it's really how much legal resources you're throwing at the problem.
Yeah, we saw one of Nancy Pelosi's daughters was posting videos about her running around curing ballots.
Absolutely. Yes, she's in charge of the Democratic Curing Ballots initiative. I mean, that's what's going on here is, is it really fair if it's really all decided by the lawyers and the people, how much resources you can throw at the curing issue?
Well, and it's also too. It's like that they'll make the argument. Well, the extended time provides more accuracy and quality control, and yet what we find is just the opposite. In Minnesota, this was last week. 21 missing ballots were likely disposed in Scott County, Minnesota. So I don't know that it doesn't seem like there's a cure for that because you don't know. I guess I don't know if they know or not, or there's no curing provision that's provided. But a state rep there one where the 21 missing ballots were likely disposed, the election officials concluded. She won by 14 votes. That race cost Republicans a majority in the Minnesota State House. So, I mean, it's one thing. It's a ballot integrity program on the responsibility of the parties too. It's the Minnesota Republican Party, but by the same token, I mean, right? Minnesota's another state that was a laggard, and it's a laggard. We're waiting, and because there are some competitive races there, including congressional races, and then this is the sort of result. It's just like that Steele race where she's up 5 points on election night, and then 2 weeks later she concedes.
Yeah, we had another one. So 2 congressional races turned to the Democrats. There's another one, John Duarte, who's a representative from the Central Valley. Adam Gray, state assemblyman, has now overcome him in the votes in the last week as well, in addition to Michelle Steele's race. So there's 2 congressional races that have turned to the Democrats, flipped 2 seats. In the last week because of this curing process. And the rules are so lax in California that you don't have to have a postmark as of December 1st. It used to be that you had to be postmarked by December 1st. Now it just has to be dated somewhere on the envelope, on the ballot. I don't even understand what that means. I guess the lawyers will have to get involved. But they allow you to turn in, you just drop off your ballot anywhere in California, even if you're not in your own district, where the polling, where you're supposed to be. And that they say that's another reason why it takes so long, because they have to redistribute all the ballots to the counties where they're supposed to be counted.
Oh my God, this just seems like fraud. So is there any appetite to get this corrected or speed things up for the midterms? Or is this just how it's going to be in California because it's to their advantage?
It is. I believe it is to Democrats' advantage. And there is an effort that Huntington Beach passed a voter ID law, and there's a lot of support for that among Republicans. Of course, Democrats control supermajority in the California legislature, both in the Assembly and the Senate. So, but they are challenging that in court, and they did win their initial appeal. Rob Bonta, the Attorney General in California, immediately after Huntington Beach passed the voter ID law, they went in and challenged it in court, the Attorney General. And this is common for the Attorney General. He does this a lot to local issues, including the parental notification laws passed by local school boards. That's how heavy-handed the California state government is. But they did win their first case in court, Huntington Beach. So a lot of the Republicans are hoping that it's a good sign, but it could go all the way to the Supreme Court on this voter ID law, which is, you have to get a pack of cigarettes in California. You have to pull out your ID, your driver's license. So, it's a big issue across the country whether you should have to have an ID to vote. I remember in Virginia, I lived in Virginia, you had to provide some sort of identification, and they checked off your name to give you a ballot. Here in California, it's mostly you get your ballot in the mail, and then you just go drop it off, and they don't ask for anything.
But can you
Scout's honor.
check your ballot?
Yeah.
I mean, because I do recall my friend in California saying that she would go online to see where her ballot is. Is that true?
You can, yes, you can, and they do have a tracking system for the custody of the ballot. But it's really, I wanted to go vote in person, and voting in person is virtually the same. There's no check. They just take your ballot. There's no, who are you, where, none of that.
And And in
Might as
Scott County,
well just put it in the mail.
yeah, and in Scott County, Minnesota, you can watch your ballot be discarded in a garbage can. So that's
Yeah,
fun.
and there was something stolen in the Michelle Steele's district. There was a report that there was theft at a post office. So I have to look into that. But it was a California Globe report. But yeah, it doesn't instill confidence. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, that's an understatement. I wanted to get your reaction to the Southern news about nominees for cabinet posts in the Trump administration being threatened. Lee Zeldin, former New York City congressman, the EPA nominee. Pipe bomb was threat targeting me and my family at our home today, was sent in with a pro-Palestinian themed message. My family and I were not at home at the time and are safe. We're working with law enforcement to learn more as the situation develops. Tom Homan, unsurprisingly, has been the subject to death threats as well. He's taking it a little bit more seriously now than he was previously. Here's what Homan had to say when asked about that on Fox.
I'll be honest with you, I have not taken it serious up to this point. Now that I know what's happened in the last 24 hours, I will take it a little more serious. But look, I've been dealing with this when I was the ICE director in the first administration. I had numerous death threats. And I had a security detail with me all the time. Even after I retired, the death threats continued. And even after I retired as the ICE director, I had U.S. Marshals protection for a long time to protect me and my family. And what doesn't help is all the negative press around the president and people he's putting in his cabinet. Me, I'm not in the cabinet, but, I've read numerous hit pieces on me. I'm a racist and I'm the father of family separation, all this other stuff. So the hate media doesn't help at all because there are some nuts out there that will take advantage. So that doesn't help. And I thought we're beyond that after the election's over, that we're going to get beyond that. But, I will now start taking a little more serious after I just heard what's happened the last 24 hours. Up to that point, I was the attitude that if I'm not home, my family's not home. And they're not home right now, but when I return home, I'm going to bring them home. But I was of the attitude lately that if you want some, come get some. Because, I've been through this many, many times. And but again, what I've learned today, I'll start taking a little more serious.
I do like the default position of if you want some, come get some. But the I guess the number of death threats and the number of people targeted with those threats is something that's rising to the level that Tom Homan is taking it more seriously. So clearly, Lee Zeldin as well. Is this an area where Secret Service has a role to play and some questions to answer?
Absolutely. It's unfortunate because the Secret Service keeps taking on more and more responsibility. They have more protectees every year than they ever have. And they, as you know, as I've reported extensively on, their training, their standards, their even how often they practice at the range is going down. The DEA hiring policies and priorities of the Biden administration and of the former director Kimberly Cheadle, and I believe Ron Rowe, the acting director, has continued that, is really hurting the Secret Service. I'm working on a story right now about there's been several suicides in recent weeks in the Secret Service ranks, and they don't do a mental health test before they hire. This, I think, putting additional burdens on the Marshal Service, on the Department of Homeland Security, and the Secret Service is going to be a problem right now because those agencies have woke leaders that have imposed these lowering of these standards. It used to be an elite agency, and all of the rank and file that I talk to are just begging for reform in the Secret Service, and they're encouraged that Donald Trump has won. But if their work continues to increase by the number of people facing threats, I don't think they're up to the task before the inauguration. I'm really concerned. I'm deeply concerned about this time before the inauguration.
Is there a sense of who is on Trump's shortlist for Secret Service director and whether that person will be from the inside or outside?
Yes, I've reported on two of the top names that were circulating are Dan Bongino, who, as you know, was a former Secret Service agent, and he had 11 years in the agency.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and then Donald Trump's top detail, the boss of his team, that are the closest to him and have accompanied him since he started his campaign. His name is Sean Curran. So those are the two top candidates. Now, I thought Dan would be the rank and file really liked Dan because he was his sort of outsider perspective, and they thought he would definitely bring reform because he's not going to. He has made a priority on his podcast of talking about the need for the Secret Service reforms and especially the DEI concerns that he has over those priorities. But he took his name. It appears he took his name out of the running last week or the week before, when he said he prefers to be on the outside because politics is a dirty business. He had two tweets that he posted on X stating that. So there's other people in the mix. There's Tom Armas, who is a general in the Marines, and we have only had one general, we've only had one outsider in the Secret Service ever be appointed, and that's Tex Ailes, and Donald Trump appointed him during his time in office. So he's been pushed by the commandant of the Marines and a lot of the military side. He's a 9/11 hero. He went into the World Trade buildings and saved people when he was a Secret Service agent in New York. There's video of him rushing into the buildings and saving several people, carrying them out. And there are other people within the Secret Service who have retired that names are circulating as well. Billy Davis, who's his claim to fame, he's a very well-known Secret Service agent, very top caliber person. And he was also known he was a former Clemson football player. And then Jim Lewis, who was a former Delta Force before he joined the Secret Service. He's retired now. And Michael D'Ambrosia, who is currently in the Secret Service, who actually was known for getting Trump off a stage in Nevada when he was facing a threat from the audience. And it was like very clean. So compared to what happened in Butler, people are saying that was he did a better job that day in terms of protecting Donald Trump. So these names are circulating. I personally think that Eric Prince could be a dark horse as well.
Oh, wow. That would be interesting. That would be interesting. Boy, there comes another controversial confirmation hearing. Oh boy.
Well, there's no confirmation for the
that's right. I'm sorry. That's right. Yeah.
No,
Well,
that'd
just be another just be another source of controversy. Although if he gets the job done, I mean that's the whole point, right? You want somebody that where you don't talk about Secret Service, they blend into the woodwork because they're doing their job and there's nothing to talk about, right? That's sort of the point.
That is what their mission is.
Yeah.
Zero fail.
Susan Crabtree is the RealClearPolitics.com national political correspondent. Susan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Amy Jacobson and Dan Proft here, and we want to tell you about our 2024 Food for the Poor campaign.
If you've listened to the station and to our show for any length of time, then you already know about Food for the Poor. They're a nonprofit, faith-based organization that provides food, water, medicine, clothing, and life-saving supplies directly to local partners in Latin America and the Caribbean.
We all know how bad the situation is right now in Latin America and the Caribbean.
For many families, the cost of food has simply become prohibitive, leading to sickness and starvation.
The only thing standing between these families and starvation is Food for the Poor. But in order to get this food to those who need it most, Food for the Poor needs your help. Your one-time gift of just $50 can provide life-saving food for a child